Doctor, if you would.
December 24th, 2517. I just received a batch of after-action reports regarding the fates of the replacements. Longevity is well beyond what I've seen in laboratory conditions. Could the effect of their parents attempting to nurture them back to health be a factor? I've assigned Jackboot to track this. I can't bear the detailed reports of the hosts' and parents' sufferings, and in all too many cases, their death and grieving. I feared this would happen to me. Something about the parent-offspring relationship debilitates my otherwise objective reasoning. Evokes emotions far more than anticipated.
This entry is particularly interesting and also quite dark in its scope. Halsey references directly the Flash clones that were used as replacements for the Spartan Candidates when they were kidnapped and inducted into the Spartan program. She took absolutely no pleasure in the realization of the pain and suffering that these clones were experiencing during their degradation, and was surprised by the fact that some of them were surviving much longer than laboratory conditions, likely due to the parents' attempts to try to keep them alive. This is again one of those times where Halsey demonstrates her morally grey aptitude rather than the clean black and white war criminal that she's been painted to be in more recent media. There also appears to be some minor continuity errors in this particular entry, but we'll address that shortly. Right now, let's discuss the clones. While Flash cloning entire humans is possible, the procedure is by no means perfect. It is illegal in accordance with the UN colonial mortal dictator. The process involves the modification of a cloned human embryo, which causes it to develop 100 times faster than it would have naturally. Many anomalies appear as a result of this abnormal developmental rate. They lack the muscle memory and socialization of their hosts. Though these problems can be remedied with intensive therapy, compounding biological defects cannot be corrected. Rapid Flash cloning of such immense volumes of tissue induce gross DNA base pair errors. Congenital defects increase 42%, and incidence of Parkinson plus syndromes increase 67%. Although a small percentage of Flash clones can have a normal life expectancy, most Flash clones will start to degenerate from metabolic instability as part of a process called metabolic cascade failure, death from various neurological and physiological disorders. The average half-life of a Flash clone is 14.7 weeks in laboratory conditions. Dr. Catherine Halsey developed and perfected a technique through which a living person's memories can be transferred to a Flash cloned brain, thus creating a clone that is virtually identical to the original host. This process used a fast Fourier transform X-ray 3D scan to map a brain's ionic density patterns. This data could then be used to create a virtual map of every individual link in the brain's neuron pattern. This data would then be used in a deep stimulating scan of a Flash clone's blank brain, which would cultivate an identical pattern of linkages and accurately replicate the memories of the host person. Unfortunately, this memory replication results in 82% rates of dementia, schizophrenia, and cancers in the recipient's brain. This technique was used to create identical clones for the Spartan 2 candidates, which replaced the children after the candidates were abducted from their homes. Most of the Flash clones quickly died natural deaths, which were explained as pre-existing genetic disorders, drawing suspicion away from the Office of Naval Intelligence. Contrary to Halsey's expectations, many of the clones lived far longer than previously estimated based on laboratory conditions, with at least 4 surviving until 2525. Halsey's attempt to cover up the Spartan 2 program's use of Flash clones, combined with her alleged selfish motives for using the clones, contributed to her detainment by the Office of Naval Intelligence after the Human Covenant War. It's so easy, when described with language like this, to forget that these Flash clones were living, breathing human beings. They were real children, not military hardware, not some kind of lifeless android. They were real human beings. Clones, yes, but that doesn't make them any less human, any less of a child, any less scared. These clone children were grown at an accelerated rate, over 100 times faster. A normal human baby takes 9 months of gestation. That's approximately 40 weeks to go from a fertilized egg to a newborn baby. Assuming the growth rate was maintained through the entirety of gestation, these clones went from a fertilized egg to the equivalent of a 6-year-old in 21.9 days. They would have experienced their bodies growing and stretching by the moment. Worse still is that their minds would have been utterly empty. The only information their brains will have been capable of processing during the vast majority of their growth was the pain and discomfort. Upon the completion of their growth, they would undergo the memory transfer. Though it is unclear if or how Oni managed to scan the ionic density patterns of the candidates, what is known is that the memory pattern was then transferred into the blank brains of the clones. The issue herein is that memories would have no context. Memories are formed with immense amounts of peripheral information from the sympathetic nervous system, the amygdala to give the memories an emotional context, the sensory system giving visual, auditory, tactile or olfactory context to the memory. While the clones would possess memories, they'd have no contextual understanding of the memories. They would genuinely feel like the memories of another person had been poured into their minds, which is painfully accurate to the truth. They'd have no muscle memory, so the skills such as walking, talking, using knives and forks for eating, hand-eye coordination, complex motor skills would all be there in their memories, but they'd have no ability to perform the actions they so vividly remember doing. On top of this, their social skills would almost be entirely absent. All of this basic information and functions that any normal 6-year-old develops over their lifetime would have to be acceleratedly taught to these clones, these empty children, so that the Office of Naval Intelligence's lies and black projects were sufficiently covered. These children wouldn't have known their parents. The clones would, in all but genetics, have no loved ones. At the equivalent of 6 years old, they wouldn't have known love, affection, a cuddle from a loved one to let them know that they are loved. Remember, clone or not, these children are living. They have consciousness. They are, in every single way we can measure, real, living, breathing, sentient human beings. They are 6-year-old children. And while they don't understand their memories, their lives, who they are, or anything of love and affection, they feel. They feel disorientation. They feel pain. They feel the emptiness. They feel fear. And now, the worst part of all of this. These clone children would be sedated by the emotionless adults who prepared them. They would wake up an indeterminate period of time later in a bed still warm from the previous occupant. A bed that smell is utterly unfamiliar, and yet they have a memory of it. They wake up in a room that isn't theirs, the surroundings utterly alien. With no emotional context, even if they felt scared, confused, would they have even thought to cry out for their parents, to seek the comfort of their loved ones that they have memories of, but no context or feelings for? In the morning, the door to their bedroom will have opened and 2 utter strangers would walk through the door and call them a name they don't recognize. They'd respond to them as if they know them, but the children would have no clue who these strangers were, or even who they themselves were. There would be memories of them, but no context, no love, no affection. These strangers would immediately begin to think that something was wrong. They'd ask questions the children didn't have answers for. They'd grow ever more concerned until they eventually take them to doctors to diagnose the problem. Over the coming days and weeks, these children would begin to inexplicably fall ill, their bodies, their own DNA, failing on them. Doctors would diagnose an exotic autoimmune disease, and these strangers, these parents, would simply look on distraught and powerless as what they perceived to be their child began wasting away before their eyes. These children, these 6-year-old children, would have lived a life of chaos, disorientation, confusion, pain and anguish, feeling empty, having memories that weren't their own, living in bodies that weren't theirs, with homes and parents and toys that they had no emotional recollection of, just the empty, emotionless memories. And now, at an average age of 124 days, or a little over 4 months from conception, these seemingly 6-year-old children would be facing their own mortality. And finally, let's address the seeming continuity error in regards to this particular entry. Halsey discusses here that she has some problems in regards to the parent-offspring relationship that debilitates her otherwise objective reasoning. It's no secret that Dr. Halsey and Captain Jacob Keyes are the parents of Commander Miranda Keyes. So at face value, you just kind of accept, given that she had only recently parted ways with Jacob Keyes, that she was pregnant with Miranda. But she wasn't. This entry is dated December 24th, 2517. Miranda was born February 28th, 2525. Yet in the March 9th, 2525 entry, there is a note in a coffee stain that reads, "She will have to answer for making me drink decaf." If this was Deja telling Halsey caffeine should be avoided during pregnancy, this would have been a couple of weeks after Miranda was born. Winding the clock back to this particular entry, she references her parental instincts, but that's a whole 7 to 8 years before Miranda was born, and only 3 months after she apparently last saw Jacob. The thing is, there is another entry that we'll cover in the near future, in 2524, where she references meeting Jacob Keyes once again, and it is heavily suggested in that particular entry that that was the night that he and her slept with each other. But even that doesn't necessarily add up, because if they slept together in November of 2524, Miranda was born in February of 2525, meaning the pregnancy was either only 3 months long, or Dr. Halsey was already 6 months pregnant at this point. There's also no entry between today's entry and the entry in November of 2524 suggesting she met Keyes again at any point. Again, it doesn't rule out that she didn't in fact see Keyes at some point between these two dates and just didn't write about it in her journal, but it just seems odd that she's already calling into question her parent-offspring relationship 7 to 8 years before Miranda was even born. It is worth noting that if we take the journal at face value, then she was conceived in November of 2524, meaning she would have been born 9 months later, approximately around August of 2525. It was actually the Halo Essential Visual Guide which retconned Miranda's birth date to February of 2525, so it could just be that the Essential Visual Guide is incorrect and inconsistent. Or it could be that the Essential Visual Guide is supposed to be the new correct source, in which case the Halseys Journal is actually incorrect. In either case, it's a simple continuity error, but it was worth bringing up. My personal opinion is that we should perhaps lean on the journal a little bit more, as 1, it predates the Essential Visual Guide, 2, it's actually a piece of in-game lore, while the Essential Visual Guide is a guide to the games. So I would personally rank the journal's lore and the information that we can glean from it at a higher tier, so to speak, than the Essential Visual Guide, but that isn't necessarily exactly how things work. That's just my 2 cents on the subject. And on that subject, I'd love to hear your thoughts in regards to what to make of this continuity error and which particular version of the lore to accept as canon. Leave your comments down below. And until next time, thanks for watching. Stick your comments down below, and I look forward to what you have to say. And quick shout outs and thank yous to my patrons: Spartan 10148, my devastatingly effective Metarch class Ancilla; Silver Spartan, Leon, Ram, Prophet Bear, and Irrefutable Justice, my ever-vigilant monitors.
the careful tending of Alvin, Andrew, Brian, Cameron, Darian, Devon, Phantom, Flaming Halo, Cabal, Legions Lost, Michael, Spartan 0137, The Cave Potato and Wolf Eclipse, my sub-monitors, my growing fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my most loyal of enforcers, and all my awesome Sentinels, Sentries and Constructors who have jumped aboard on Patreon to help support the channel. You have my debt of gratitude. And, as ever, Todd Morrison, my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube member. Thanks for keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, as it all helps the channel grow and helps me to continue to deliver this kind of content for you guys. And if you're ready for your next steps in evolution, head over to Patreon and become a patron there, or become a YouTube member to attain a higher state of being. Much love to all of you, take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.